Good morning, 8th graders. It's Monday, March 30th. Um, our agenda for this week is laid out for you on the family portal under lesson plans for 8th grade for history. You can check that out. For Monday, we have the next two sections to read. They're called Roman Amusements and Pompey's Conquests. And then tomorrow, um, you have two more, the next two readings that's about uh, Caesar's conquests and the conspiracy of Catiline. Those are four readings, four little chapters, Monday and Tuesday. And then tomorrow we will also meet in Zoom at our normal time and discuss those two readings. And then your narration will be due on Wednesday of this week. So narration of those four sections. You can just read them Monday, a little bit Tuesday, and then Wednesday turn in the next section on your Google Doc. Okay, so that's the beginning of the week for us. So I wanted to go over a little bit of today's reading with you, and then also give you a little something extra on top of it. So our readings today are about how Rome, after defeating Carthage, is starting to now expand beyond just the little boot of Italy and the neighboring little areas. They wanted now to turn their eyes towards the Hellenized world. The Hellenized world, we remember, is that whole area that was conquered by Alexander the Great. They spoke Greek. They weren't all friends. Remember, that kingdom had been broken up into four parts. His generals got different sections of it, and they aren't all on the same page in the sense like, hey, we're all friends, we're going to take on Rome together. They wouldn't have thought of themselves as like teammates, friends, allies, even though they spoke the same language and did the same kinds of things. They still were all wanted to fight Rome on their own, really. And so that's one of the reasons that Rome is going to have an easy time conquering them, or easier time conquering them, is because they don't all rally together. And that should sound familiar, right? We know the history of the Greeks and their city-states and how they never really got along and banded together very well. And that's what's going to happen now in the Hellenized world. Those four kingdoms that were split up after Alexander the Great are all going to try to take on Rome by themselves, and that's not going to work out super great for them. Um, so I wanted to go. Here's a picture of uh, the the Hellenized world over there on the side of the Mediterranean. There, you see all those different colors, different parts of Alexander's empire split up after uh, Rome takes over Carthage. That red area at the top of Africa and over there in Spain and Portugal, they then start to move towards those areas that are the green and yellow and aqua green, and they start to try to conquer over there. And then the purple area, that's Macedonia. All right, they're going to try to take over those four different kingdoms. And I wanted to highlight especially um, one of those empires, or one of those kingdoms, the Seleucid Empire, or the Seleucid Kingdom. This is the area that was called Syria or Persia. Now it's controlled by a Greek-speaking person, right? After Alexander the Great. But this is one of the four empires that Alexander has. And why I wanted to highlight this one today was because it is the one that has control over Israel for a long period of time. And uh, you remember from your Bible readings and history classes and Bible that there's a time period that from the destruction of Jerusalem to um, the coming of Jesus, where we call like sort of the quiet years, right? That intertestamental period where nothing's really written. But that doesn't mean nothing's happening in that area. Lots of things are happening. Remember, after they go into exile into um, into Babylon, and they get taken over by the Persians. They get to return, and Nehemiah and Ezra rebuild the temple and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Um, there's still history happening in that area, even though it's not history that's in the Bible. And so I want to talk about some of the things that are happening over there and how they are fulfillments to prophecy and things that are in the Bible. So it's a very, I think, interesting story and sad story too. Um, so the Seleucid Empire right there has lots of different leaders passed down father to son and leader to leader, and so they're doing what empires do, controlling large parts of territories. And the Seleucid Empire started to see Rome getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they thought, we need to do something to stop them. How are we going to ever compete with Rome? And they thought, well, one way we could do that is if we took over the Ptolemaic Empire. Do you see down in Egypt? The Ptolemaic Empire is now in charge of Egypt, and that's the area that we kind of associate with like Cleopatra and that time period of Egyptian history where they're controlled by one of those Hellenized Greek empires. Well, the Seleucid Empire is like, well, if we took over the Ptolemaic Empire, we could then maybe have a bigger group of people to take on Rome as Rome's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And right between the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire is Israel. And they're like, hey, these guys could help us out. They have lots of wealth, lots of people, and maybe we could, if we get them on our side by force, then that would help us in taking over Egypt, or what we call the Ptolemaic period of Egypt. Well, they march in, and there's a lot of conflict in Israel, but for a time period, they say, okay, we'll go along with it. But then at some point, there's a little bit of betrayal on the parts of the Israelites to the Seleucid Empire, and the guy that was in charge of the Seleucid Empire, his name was Antiochus Epiphanes. Today's note for our video is this guy. So if you could write down Antiochus Epiphanes. This is the only note you need to take for today's lesson. Who is Antiochus Epiphanes? Well, that name Epiphanes means God manifest. You can tell that he thought of himself as a pretty great guy if he called himself God manifest. And what he did when he found out that the people in Israel had betrayed him and had a little insurrection while he was trying to take over the Egyptian Empire, the Ptolemaic Empire, he marched in to the temple and he destroyed all the stuff that was in there. Think about the Jewish temple, and think about like they had candlesticks and different altars, and they had curtains and those kind of things right inside the temple. Well, he went in, he destroyed all of that stuff or ransacked it, and he put up an idol of Zeus in the Jewish temple, the temple that the Jews worshipped in. So that's a huge sacrilege. Then, because he knew the Jewish people didn't eat pork and they thought that was unclean, they sacrificed a pig on the altar, right? And to the Jews, this was the worst thing that you could do, right? This is awful. And that actually is prophesied in Daniel 9:26, many years before it actually happens, hundreds of years before it happens, talks about someone who is going to come in and do an abomination that causes desolation. Do you see down in that section over there? It says Daniel chapter 9, verse 26 and 27, the 27 verses. He will set up an abomination that causes desolation. Some people often refer to this as something that happens at the end of time, and maybe in the the end of human history. Um, and that may be so. I don't want to get into all the different theology there, but at least there's an echo here in what Antiochus Epiphanes does. He sacrifices a pig, puts up Zeus in the Jewish um, temple, and that leads to a time period that's going to be controlled by the Maccabees. And tomorrow's lesson, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on in Israel after that happens. Obviously, the Jewish people see this happening, and they completely hate it. They freak out, and they want to resist the Seleucid Empire and what they're doing in this Antiochus Epiphanes. So I want to talk to you tomorrow about the Maccabees, the guys who stand up to these awful Greek Seleucids who do some terrible things inside their temple, and I'll get to that tomorrow. Okay, so today's reading is going to be about Rome, and they're turning their eyes towards the Greeks. Today's lesson, I just wanted to highlight something else that's going on. It's not in your reading. It's about this moment in time in Israel when this Greek Empire, the Seleucid Empire, they march into Israel and they do some pretty wicked, awful things to the temple. And tomorrow I want to talk to you about the response of the Jews to that. And that's going to be a story that leads us into things like Hanukkah and some other things that Jewish people celebrate today that you might wonder, why do they do that? I don't remember that in the Bible. Well, it comes from this time period between the Testaments. And so today's lesson, you only had one note. It was about who is Antiochus Epiphanes. He was a guy who marched into the temple in Israel and did some awful things. He set up Zeus, sacrificed a pig on the altar, and desecrated the temple. And it's going to lead to a Jewish rebellion. It's going to be led by the Maccabees. And pretty amazing story. And I'll get to that tomorrow. All right, happy readings. I'll see you. Tomorrow's Zoom meeting is at the normal time, 11:24, I believe. So I'll see you tomorrow in our Zoom meeting. All right.